Welcome back. Now, it has become a mainstay every electioneering period. Freebies in the form of foodstuffs, branded T-shirts, or even cash are part of the language politicians speak with the electorate on the campaign trail. What impact does this have on how voters make their decisions at the ballot? And what larger effect does this have on democracy? It's the conversation we are unpacking here on the Voters Hub. Joining me in studio are Philip Gishina from the Mzalendo Trust and Ruth Bolo, chairperson for the International Relations Committee at the Young Democrat Union of Africa. Thank you both for joining me. I'll put a question to both of you first on just how you feel politics in Kenya has been commercialized. I'll start with you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I think what we're seeing is essentially what you've said, like the commercialization of politics. Things have really changed. It has become a very transactional kind of way. And the reality is that it is completely distorting democracy as we know it. At the moment, if you look at all the campaign rallies, the freebies, as you've highlighted, you have to give people something for people to attend your meeting. So the problem with this is that essentially what we are seeing is that there is no space for ideologies anymore. Right. We see a competition of how flashy your campaigns look like. We see a competition of no ideas at all. So as such, what we are seeing is quite a dangerous route that we are heading. And even as we move into the election, you can see the kind of, now even politicians themselves don't know who are my supporters, because the people who come to those rallies essentially are people who are bought or given something or promised something in return for their attendance. Right. So it has become like a job for some people, and especially if you look at the high rate of unemployment that we do have in the country, it's becoming quite a problem.
Yeah, you know, Ruth, Philip has just talked about how this process has been incentivized. People won't come unless you give me something. And when you think about that exchange between politician and electorate, is it the electorate giving up their power and their agency, you know, in a way where they cannot interrogate because I've gotten something from this person?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having us. You know, you cannot put the politicians, you cannot oversight these leaders once they're in government, because they bought you. They bought your vote. So how do you then come back and ask me about the budget-making process? How then do you come back and ask me if I have lobbied for something or if I have sponsored any bill in any legislative house? Because I bought you, so you are not able to tell me. So they're absolutely giving their power. However, we also need to be honest, and I've said this before, it is the tough economic times that are putting our people in this situation. You know, this period is basically the period where they know it is a time to make money. Yeah. And it is a time where even the handlers of those politicians, who ideally they're supposed to be trusting the most, are using this period to swindle them off some money and gain some assets. So you then ask yourself, who is honest in this chain? Right from, you know, the second or the right-hand man of this leader or this candidate all the way down. And so we are absolutely giving our power, but it is also more of a societal problem other than a problem or rather a gap in the law.
Yeah. You know, Philip, Ruth has talked about a societal problem. So it's not just the politicians with the problem, it's the people receiving the money as well. And I really wonder, does this kind of set up an unrealistic expectation on the part of the voters of what your leader is supposed to do for you? Because you can see many complain. They say, oh, we see you during the campaign trail, but in that 5-year gap, you are nowhere to be seen. So in terms of how they should be engaging, even after voting in these individuals, does that also take away their ability to do that?
Very true. If you look at how and research that has been done in the country that highlights, there's a research that was done on the cost of politics by Mzalendo Trust and other organizations. Yeah. It indicates that over the years, 20 years ago, one required at least 10 million for you to vie as a member of parliament. That was in 2002. Now, if you look at the statistics, it has continued to increase with 10 million over the years. Wow. So as we speak, in 2017, they were highlighting about a range of 38 to around 40 million. So as we speak, that is how far it has gone. In this election, 2017, most likely, again, it is likely to do around 50. We'll be talking about 50 million for you to vie for those, for the member of parliament seats. But the question comes, One, a member of parliament, for example, earns roughly a million bob in a month. So how long will it take you to recover your money that you have spent in these elections? So if I go in immediately and I've spent all that money, most likely the first years or rather mostly they say, if you speak to the politicians, they'll tell you that in the first 3-4 years, I'll be seriously looking how to make, to recoup the money that I've spent in these elections. So that means that person will be spending more time recovering that money and won't have single time to attend to this issues that are coming from the constituency, for example. But the problem comes, as Ruth has highlighted, is a societal problem. So when you speak to the people, they'll tell you, Mheshimiwa, somebody has not been on the ground. What voters are saying is that we have not eaten from his plate. Yeah, so it is a way that we have encouraged these members or our leaders to do that kind of transactional way of addressing or rather doing politics, and we have left our power so that we can't question them what they do. Yeah. So when it comes to CDF, in the management, for example, or the constituency development kitties and the various kitties that are there for these leaders, the first thing they'll prioritize is one, who funded our campaigns, yeah, before they sit to listen to you as a mwananchi. So when they do that, you continue suffering, you don't have water, you don't have all those things they keep promising. So your expectations, and during the rallies they'll keep promising, you know, it's part of the campaign thing to continue promising, but the reality is that they'll spend quite a measurable time just to recover what they have spent in these elections.
Yeah, Philip has just spoken to one of the consequences of this vote buying, if you will, Ruth. But when you look at the bigger implications on democracy, because many of the groups that are targeted, and you said this, you know, are the vulnerable groups, those who are in the low-income areas. They would appreciate 200, 500 shillings in that day.
Even 50 shillings.
Or even 50. I'm probably going higher. But when you think about that and how future elections will be run, and how people will engage with their leaders, you know, what's the danger on democracy as a whole?
You know, first, just to add to what Philip said, I have been in areas whereby the electorates will tell you, finish talking quickly so that you could give us, you know, what you're giving us. And sometimes, if you do not give them even that 50 shillings, best believe you will not leave that area. You will not. If they have to barricade the place, they will do it. And so, and I'm also concerned. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm all about us having a peaceful election. But can we also talk about telling the voters, what should you look out for in your candidates? What is that thing that we should be talking to them about? Because what we've been doing is that we have been talking about peace, but we're not talking about the justice, the free, fair and transparent election. So what we are saying, and we're just talking about it with Philip earlier on, is that we're telling people whatever the outcome is, just accept and move on because we want a peaceful election. Right. But we're not telling them that this is what you should look for in a candidate. In as much as you want them to come and give you this amount, you know, this is what you should look at. And I was just reading and you know, this week, and I was seeing that Kenya alone, in the wake of these elections, we imported over 300 helicopters, which is not a small number. In Kenya alone, it has gotten to a point where we have run out of, you know, T-shirts that we can brand. If you ask, if even a corporate entity wants to get even just polo shirts right now for their company, it's going to take them 2 to 3 weeks. And it's going to be at an absurd price. And it's because when you go back to the electorates, they're going to ask you, hi, Mheshimiwa, ata T-shirt, ata kalamu, you know, and in as much as before, these were more visibility items, so that then if I am, you know, on a motorbike, then whoever is riding me, then whoever rather is you know, carrying me, then I can see at their back that, you know, vote for Victoria Rubadiri for this, this, and this. But right now, those T-shirts are, as you say, freebies. And so in the long run, what then happens is, number one, like you're saying, you cannot control the leaders because they need to recover their money. So even this issue of always increasing and decreasing their salaries depending on the time of the elections, it is because they need to recover their money. And also this thing of electorates complaining that we have not seen you on the ground is because, what am I going to come and tell you if I'm not giving you money? Because some of them will tell you, and I think a number of them have said it over and over again, for them to go back to their villages, even after election, especially for the parliamentary candidates, a weekend will cost you about 500,000 shillings. Of a weekend. So we also, and I also feel like we cannot be lenient with them, and we should also not pity them, because these are things that they have brought upon themselves. The minute I know that you have not done anything in my area, but you're always giving me money, that is the expectation I will always have of you. So we can also not pity our leaders and tell them that we are sorry you're going through this, it's quite expensive for you. And the problem is that it's not a fair level ground for our young people who are vying, for our women who are vying, and for people with disabilities. Because then how do I compete? How, as a young person, how do I compete with you who has 50 million shillings? Where am I supposed to get 50 million shillings from?
You know, and we have to now talk about the remedies and solutions, because it can take us into another route where you feel it's a hopeless situation. Yeah. IEBC tried with the campaign financing regulations, and we saw what happened with that. But realistically speaking, Philip, how do we begin to remedy? Because it's a culture, when you think about it, that has entrenched itself in our society.
Yeah. I think we need to begin somewhere, and one, IBC tried, but I like to put this problem when it comes to maybe IBC trying to implement the Election Campaign Financing Act. I wish to blame Parliament. In 2013, Parliament enacted the Election Campaign Financing legislation. Come 2017, when it was supposed to be implemented, they introduced an amendment to that act and pushed the implementation of that act post-2017. So as such, in this election, we should have had a legal framework which IBC could have ideally used to regulate election campaign financing. But the same script that members of Parliament used way back in 2017 to frustrate even the development of the regulations is the same one they did in this time and during these elections, and say that IBC submitted the regulations late into the elections, the 12-month period window that is required to be submitted. So that is one, that Parliament has failed us when it comes to properly ensuring that we regulate money that is used in elections. The second thing is also now, for us as a people, we have to realize that, yes, this money, this politics is becoming unsustainable. I think in the world, we carry out one of the most expensive elections, I think, after Papua New Guinea. So if this continues, as Ruth has highlighted, we're not going to have any youth winning a parliamentary seat or even running for this election. We have just, the way I've just highlighted, you need 50 million. You're a youth. How do you get 50 million? In fact, studies indicate that traditionally, and if you look at also the figures, they indicate that there are three cadres of people that join elections. One, you'll have successful businessmen, you'll have senior retired civil servants, you'll have hotshot lawyers who have made it. And now we are also seeing a trend that there is a new group they call the wash people. Yeah, they have that money, so they don't feel accountable. You know, when you spend money that you didn't work for, you don't feel that pinch. But if it is my money, my savings, my pension, I'll definitely feel bad using that. So what we really need to do as a nation is we need to stop and think and say, this is enough. I like scenarios where we normally see in some organizations or some areas where people are conducting social vetting. At that instances, people will ask you about policies in those town halls, or I've seen examples of those meetings. They'll ask you about your policies and you will explain your manifesto and how you intend to tackle those issues that they are grappling with. So I think we need to move from that flashy, blizzy way of doing politics and go back to the basics. Money that has been poured in this election, we are already seeing the effects of it. I mean, it's inflation. So if you have 200 shillings and I have 200 shillings and we need to buy vegetables, I mean, me who's selling, I need to sell it competitively. So I think we need to realize it that even from the politicians, if you look at even the citizens, it is totally becoming unsustainable and we need to go back to the basics.
So Ruth, before I get the last word from you, a very interesting thought here from Abukayo Murunga, who says there's need to thoroughly invest in voter civic education, not just immediately before an election, but this should run through with or without an election context. We have a long way to go in terms of demonetizing our politics.
And what he's saying is very correct. You know, civil society, or rather than, you know, let me call them civil society. One thing they have been doing over the years is a lot of voter education. They really have tried their best. And then what did we do? We went and then put out all these laws that then caps their spending, that then caps, you know, their scope of work. And so how who then is going to help us?
Right.
Who is going to help us if not civil society? That is one. And two, Philip mentioned Parliament. We cannot police the very same people who are going to make these laws. It didn't just happen with this law that was trying to put the cap on the campaign finance. It also happened with the, two-third gender that IBC was trying to bring in political parties. So we cannot police the very same people who are making these laws in Parliament. One thing we need to intentionally do, and probably this is a whole other conversation, is improve our standards of living. Because if I have free secondary and primary education, I'm not going to call you, Mheshimiwa, I need school fees. If I have proper healthcare, I'm not going to call you and say. So that's why I said it's a societal issue. Because if my living standards are, they can't be perfect, but if they are up to date, if they are, a bit more comfortable, then I will not need handouts from you. All I will need is to know, how are you improving what is already there? And at that point, even if you call me and tell me you're giving me 200 shillings, I'm going to be like, what is 200 shillings is not going to feed me for the next 5 years. But if you're going to tell me that you're going to bring an investor here, that my child who just graduated is going to be able to get a job in a factory you just opened, then I will be able to do something about it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ruth and Philip, for coming in. That's all the time we have. But keep the conversation going on social media. Hashtag is Citizen Weekend. We'd love to hear from you in terms of what you think about the handout culture. We'll be back with much more. Stay with us. The hotly